Hello and welcome to another episode of Cooking from the Pioneer Pantry. My name is Cory Van Zytveld. In this episode, we will be making Trusty pork and beans. Pork and beans was the most basic recipe that you could make using ingredients that you had in hand. You could have salt pork, which was salted and put in a barrel and kept throughout the winter that way, so you could use it in the winter and the spring. And then also beans, which were dried and could be kept for a very long time. For this recipe, I will need dried beans. I have about 1.5 pounds of these, and these are scarlet runner beans that we grew and harvested last summer, and then we let them dry and kept them throughout the winter. And then I also have about 12 ounces of salt pork, and you can use bacon or modern salt pork for this. And then just enough water to pour over the top to cook it in. I will first take my beans. Like I said, I let them soak overnight. I will pour them into a colander and drain off that excess water. It'll fit, there we go. And then pour them back in here. And rinse them with a little bit of more water. And I'll pour this off as well. Set that aside. Now that I've rinsed my beans, I'll look through them and just make sure that there's no stones or shriveled beans or anything like that that wouldn't be good in our pork and beans. Especially if you're growing these yourself, you could have sticks or stones or beans that don't look quite right in there. Let's move those around. And I don't see anything, so I'll move on to putting it all together. So I'll take my pot here, and I have my bean pot. And this is a pot made for soups and beans and the like. I'll put my beans in there. And then I have my salt pork. So today I'm using a modern salt pork. And the difference between a traditional salt pork, such as early Colorado pioneers would use, and what we have available to us today, is traditionally salt pork was put into barrels and then layered with salt, and then oftentimes a salt brine was poured over the top. And this kept it preserved for a very long time, for many months, and it kept it fresh and palatable. When using traditional salt pork, however, it'd be completely covered in salt. So you would have to soak it and cut the rind on it, which is the rind is what's formed by the salt before using it. But modern pork, like I have here, is cured and unsmoked and then salted, but not salted to the degree that it has to preserve for many months. So I don't have to do any of that. I can just use it as is. So I'll put that in here. And the reason that I'm using modern salt pork and not traditional salt pork today is that traditional salt pork is very hard to come by. You oftentimes have to make it yourself, which is something we didn't do this last year. So we are relying on modern salt pork instead. All right, we'll put that all in there and pour enough water over the top to cover it. This is all I'll be putting into our pork and beans today. If you want, you can do some sort of seasoning, so pepper or cayenne. But as I'm doing the most basic recipe today, it's simply just pork, beans, and water. Now that I have all of our ingredients in our pot, I'll put this over our fire. And let it boil for about 20 minutes. When you're cooking this at home, make sure you put it on high heat and let it boil for a good amount of time. Check your package on your beans for how long you need that to be. Beans have a toxin in them that is removed by boiling them. It depends on the type of your bean, so just pay attention to your packaging on that. So like I said, I'll let this boil for about 20 minutes and then I'll come back to it. Another thing to know about boiling your beans is, I don't know if historically people knew about the toxins in beans, but all of the recipes that I looked at recommended boiling your pork and beans or just your beans before your final cook time, which I thought was very interesting. I let my pork and beans boil for about 20 minutes and then I took it off of direct heat. So I would say turn it down to about medium heat and let it simmer for several hours. The longer the better. An hour or two will suffice to cook the beans through well enough, and it is ready to serve. And because my beans are purple, it has dyed my pork purple. Give this a try and get a little bit of pork and beans. It's very tasty. The salt pork gives it a nice flavor, a salty flavor. And the beans, probably depending on how well you like your beans cooked. These actually aren't overly cooked, so I enjoy that. But you could cook them longer if that's what you prefer. Thank you for joining us on this episode as we made pork and beans. If you would like this recipe, please visit our website under the City of Littleton website, the Littleton Museum page under the Museum at Home tab. Please stay tuned for future episodes.